some military chiefs have been pushing this for a long, long time, British military chiefs, because they believe it will give the Ukrainians greater security and that Putin wouldn't actually dare target those British troops because he knows that if he killed any British troops, then he'd be, taking us on a path to a third world war.
Well, Larissa, tell us a little bit about what John Healey, the Defence Secretary, has been telling you.
Well, we've just come back from Ukraine where we travelled on the train to Kyiv, and now we're in Estonia, actually just about 75 miles away from the Russian border. And whilst we were in Kyiv, John Healey spoke about a lot of different things concerning Russia, but primarily we focused on his comments on the idea that British troops could be sent to Ukraine to train the Ukrainians. Now, as you know, at the moment we've got the Ukrainians coming to the UK for that training, but Healey left the door open for that training to happen inside Ukraine instead.
And what would be the advantage of training troops in Ukraine as opposed to in the UK as happens at the moment?
Well, from the Ukrainian perspective, it would just be logistically much more easier to be able to obviously take the Ukrainian forces away from the front line, all those that have been newly recruited, and send them a few hundred miles away to be trained, rather than having to fly them all the way to the UK. That takes a lot of time. It also is just logistically difficult. And actually, as the war goes on and they're recruiting conscripts, it also probably raises some questions as to how sort of secure all of that will be. Will some of the Ukrainians coming to the UK actually want to go back? So I think it's raised lots of issues, and so it'd just be more efficient to be able to do it inside Ukraine. But obviously there's been a lot of nervousness inside the UK government about doing that, because of course if you've got a large UK footprint in the country, there are concerns that Russia could then see them as a target.
Well, that's a really good point. I mean, even though, and we should be clear, this is not a suggestion that British troops would fight on the front line with the Ukrainians, will this not just be seen by the Kremlin as an escalation?
I think it undoubtedly will be. I think we'll probably, obviously hear a lot from the Kremlin over the next few days about it. From their perspective, they will say that British troops are on the ground. They're there in a sort of combat role, even though they won't be. And the UK will obviously be pushing back, saying that this is just training those forces. But I think it will escalate things. And that's obviously why people have been worried so far. But equally, some military chiefs have been pushing this for a long, long time, British military chiefs, because they believe it will give the Ukrainians greater security and that Putin wouldn't actually dare target those British troops because he knows that if he killed any British troops, then he'd be, taking us on a path to a third world war.
And it's not just the training. He's also talking about a 5-point plan. Talk us through some of the other things he's talking about in terms of support.
Yeah, so he met his Ukrainian counterpart yesterday in the capital, and he delivered this 5-point plan that the British have come up with, which part of that is about the training and making it more adaptable and easier for the Ukrainians to carry out. Another part is giving more money. Another part is basically giving more lethal weapons and different weapons than they've given previously. We've not got all of those details yet, but that'll be interesting when we hear more about exactly what they want to give them. Some of it might be some air defence type equipment, and also just helping economically, both in terms of putting more sanctions on the Russians, but also obviously providing Ukraine more finance in other means.
How significant is the timing of this? Why is he making this announcement now?
I think Healey is concerned that obviously we're coming up to some of the toughest months that the Ukrainians are going to face because of the winter. It's getting extremely cold. And also Donald Trump's coming in January. And I think Healey wanted to travel to Ukraine just before Christmas to show the Ukrainians that the British support is still there. It's unwavering. It's going to continue. And that basically, even if Trump does come in, the UK is not going to pull out. Well, obviously Trump is going to come in, but even if Trump then has this peace deal that the Ukrainians don't seem to be particularly keen on, at least the British government is still going to be supporting Ukraine in every way it can possibly.
So that's really interesting, because there might be some people who say, isn't this too little too late? If you've got Trump coming in and he's previously said he can solve this within 24 hours, what is the point of providing this support now? But Britain's argument would be they are in it for the long haul.
Exactly, although actually I spoke to one defence source who was telling me that because the Ukrainians are obviously anticipating Trump coming in, they actually are starting to lose the will to fight on the battlefield, because nobody wants to lose their lives just a few weeks away from a peace deal. And so actually it's really changing the dynamic on the front line at the moment. And at the same time, Putin is actually really trying to push through, make some ground. So he's got the strongest hand possible when those talks begin.
What has John Healey said about the return of Donald Trump and Trump's comments previously about peace?
Donald Trump, what John Healey has said previously.
No, has John Healey said anything on this trip about, Trump and the potential for peace talks?
John Healey's sort of clearly very sceptical about it. I think he seems to think that the Ukrainians need to be in a much stronger position before any peace talks begin. And I get the sense that he probably also thinks Putin can't really be trusted. And that's something that's a view been shared by a lot of other people in the British, in sort of British circles, especially in the defence industry. So I think that basically the British government is thinking that 24 hours is not a realistic prospect, and actually this is going to take much longer, and therefore the Europeans and the US really need to be in this for the long haul.
And are the other European allies of Ukraine doing something similar to what John Healey's proposing?
Eastern European countries are also trying to step up their support and help. Obviously, France and Germany are in quite a lot of political turmoil at the moment, and so I think there's some concern that the UK needs to take up a leading role in all of this at the moment. And that's one thing that Healey was stressing, is that Britain does want to take a leading role when it comes to Ukraine. The UK government has come under some criticism in recent weeks from actually Ukrainians who are saying that actually they're not taking on that leading role in the same way that the Tory government did, and that's probably concerned some of those in the Labour government, and they're keen to push out this line that we're doing as much as we possibly can.
And just finally, Larissa, you mentioned that you've moved now to Estonia. What is the Defence Secretary doing there?
He's meeting troops here at Tapa military base, and he's going to be giving them Christmas dinner. So it's a bit more festive here than it was in the meetings that we were doing in Kyiv.
Larissa, you're an absolute legend. We'll leave it there.
Що з дурдому, доставай свою аптечку, лягай в анонімний круг медиків. У мене день запечатано. Ніде не викладають, хто вчить. Яких, блядь, когось вообще хуй просиш, нахуй, блядь. Ну, це понятно, хто ми. Але в телеграмі, блядь, що робив, коли гарні фотки.